Welcome back, my friend. Today we have a big space story with a huge secret. Stay with me because every new part is more wild than the last.
No one could explain why 43 star systems went silent in exactly 8 minutes. Not destroyed, not invaded, not even attacked. Every long-range telescope still showed planets orbiting their suns, cities glowing across continents, and orbital stations hanging peacefully in space. Yet every transmission had vanished. Military frequencies, civilian broadcasts, navigation beacons, emergency channels, even quantum communication links that had never failed in recorded history all disappeared at the same instant, as though someone had reached across the galaxy and muted entire civilizations with a single command. Then the message arrived. Every government, every merchant vessel, every deep space observatory, and every listening post received the same transmission. It bypassed encryption, ignored firewalls, and appeared simultaneously on technology built by species separated by millions of years of evolution. The voice carried no anger, no urgency, and no triumph. It spoke with unsettling calm, the kind of calm that only existed after decision had already become irreversible. Do not enter the Perseus expanse. Turn your fleets around. Seal every known hyperspace corridor. This is humanity's final warning. No explanation followed. No demands. No negotiations. Only coordinates surrounding a region of space so vast that it contained hundreds of inhabited systems. Moments later, the transmission ended, leaving behind a silence more frightening than any declaration of war. Across the Galactic Assembly, panic spread faster than information. The Perseus expanse had been one of the safest trade corridors in known space for nearly 2 centuries. Billions of civilians depended on it every day. Entire economies were connected through its stable hyperspace routes. Closing it without explanation would trigger shortages, financial collapse, and political chaos across half the galaxy. The Assembly demanded answers from Earth. None came. Human embassies closed their doors without ceremony. Civilian transport vessels reversed course. Scientific expeditions abandoned decades-long research projects in the middle of their wake. Colonists voluntarily evacuated worlds they had spent generations building, leaving entire cities illuminated but empty, as if their inhabitants expected to return tomorrow. They never explained why. That frightened everyone far more than if they had declared war. For over 300 years, humanity had earned a reputation unlike any other civilization. Whenever stars collapsed, human rescue ships arrived first. Whenever plague spread across planetary populations, human medical teams crossed hostile borders without hesitation. They negotiated peace where older species chose conquest. They rebuilt shattered colonies belonging to rivals who had once insulted them openly. Some called it compassion. Others dismissed it as naivete. More than one empire quietly concluded that humans simply lacked the instinct for ruthless survival. Those assumptions suddenly felt dangerous. Within hours, independent reconnaissance fleets attempted to enter the restricted region despite Earth's warning. None crossed the outer boundary. Each vessel vanished from every sensor without producing wreckage, distress calls, or even gravitational disturbances. It was as though space itself swallowed them whole. Alien intelligence agencies searched desperately for evidence of hidden human superweapons, but nothing matched the data. There were no fleet movements, no energy signatures, no signs of combat. Humanity had not mobilized its navy. In fact, satellite surveillance showed something even stranger. Earth was dismantling military installations. Orbital shipyards shut down production. Planetary defense cannons powered off. Massive fleets that should have been preparing for the largest conflict in history instead formed escort formations around evacuation convoys carrying ordinary civilians away from frontier systems. It looked less like preparation for war, and more like a civilization trying to move innocent people as far away as possible from something it already knew was coming. 3 days later, an encrypted archive hidden beneath the oldest chamber of the Galactic Assembly unlocked itself for the first time in 14,000 years. No living species knew the password. The archive recognized only one civilization: humanity.
Wow, now this is getting big. I feel Earth is hiding far more than anyone can see.
The first Council delegation arrived in Earth's orbit expecting confrontation. Instead, they found empty diplomatic halls, silent military docks, and thousands of civilian transports leaving the solar system under heavy escort. There was no sign of panic among the human crews. Parents carried sleeping children aboard evacuation vessels with quiet efficiency. Scientists packed laboratories without protest. Engineers abandoned projects that had consumed entire careers. Every movement suggested preparation, but not fear. It was the unsettling discipline of a civilization following instructions it had rehearsed long before anyone else knew a crisis existed. Supreme Counselor Illis had represented the Galactic Assembly for nearly 90 years, surviving border wars, economic collapses, and political revolutions that had shattered younger civilizations. She had learned that frightened governments shouted, threatened, and negotiated. Confident governments displayed military power. Only one type of government became completely silent, one that had already accepted a terrible cost. Looking across Earth's orderly evacuation, she found herself hoping she was wrong. Repeated requests for explanation were answered with the same carefully worded statement. For your own survival, withdraw every vessel from the Perseus expanse. This recommendation is not political. It is not military. It is biological. No one understood what that meant. The statement spread across every communication network in known space within minutes. Analysts argued over the wording. Military strategists searched for hidden meanings. Biologists dismissed it as psychological warfare. Politicians accused humanity of manufacturing a crisis to gain strategic control over interstellar trade. The louder the debate became, the quieter Earth remained. Meanwhile, something else was happening beyond public attention. Throughout the galaxy, forgotten observatories that had not transmitted data in centuries suddenly reactivated. They were relics built before many modern civilizations had achieved spaceflight, scattered across barren moons, abandoned asteroids, and frozen rogue planets. Maintenance drones long believed dead awakened without receiving external commands. Ancient antennas slowly rotated toward the same region of space. Every installation transmitted identical data. None identified the sender. Professor Sen Taylor, the Assembly's leading archaeotechnologist, spent 48 sleepless hours comparing the activation patterns. The result made no sense. Every station shared the same engineering language despite originating from worlds separated by tens of thousands of light years. Whoever built them possessed a level of coordination beyond anything recorded in galactic history. Then his assistant noticed something impossible. Embedded beneath layers of alien engineering were microscopic repair materials unlike any known civilization had ever manufactured. At first they appeared insignificant, almost accidental. Under magnification, they revealed themselves to be self-replicating maintenance structures. Human. The laboratory fell silent. That couldn't be correct. Humanity had entered interstellar society only 3 centuries earlier. These observatories were estimated to be at least 60,000 years old. The dates had been verified hundreds of times. Yet every newly awakened station contained unmistakable traces of human technology that looked startlingly modern. Someone had altered them. Recently, the discovery was classified immediately, but secrecy lasted less than an hour before independent researchers confirmed similar findings on 6 other worlds. Suddenly, the question consuming the assembly changed completely. It was no longer, what is humanity hiding? It became, how long have they been hiding it? The answer seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Merchant captains arriving from abandoned frontier routes reported seeing enormous automated construction platforms surrounding stars that had never possessed industrial infrastructure. Deep space telescopes detected energy signatures resembling megastructures unfolding beneath gas giant atmospheres. Long-range probes photographed dormant objects emerging from asteroid belts that had appeared empty only days earlier. None carried military markings. None displayed national insignias. Every one of them responded exclusively to encrypted signals originating from Earth. Civilizations that had spent centuries believing humanity possessed only modest industrial capacity suddenly realized they had never actually measured the limits of human engineering. They had measured only what humans willingly allowed others to see. That realization unsettled even Earth's closest allies. The Viral Confederacy had fought beside human rescue fleets during the Black Nebula Plague. The Keth Dominion owed its survival to human agricultural technology after a stellar famine. Entire governments trusted humanity because humans had never exploited another civilization during its weakest moments. If even those allies had never known about these hidden systems, then who exactly had humanity been preparing them for? The answer refused to come. Instead, another transmission arrived. This one lasted only 14 seconds. It contained no voice, only a sequence of ancient coordinates followed by a sentence translated automatically into every known language. Containment integrity has fallen.
Wait a second. This is not a normal war. I think something much worse is coming.
No signature accompanied the message. No source could be identified. Every human evacuation convoy immediately accelerated. And for the first time since the crisis began, a senior human officer looked directly into a camera during a live broadcast. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but something else overshadowed it. Regret. We hoped, she said quietly, that no one would ever have to remember why those coordinates exist. Then the transmission ended before anyone could ask the question the entire galaxy was suddenly desperate to have answered. For 71 years, the coordinates had existed in every major galactic star chart. They were so ordinary that no one questioned them. Navigation systems marked the region as an unremarkable stretch of unstable space, unsuitable for colonization but perfectly harmless to bypass. Merchant captains ignored it. Explorers rarely entered it. Historians never found anything worth documenting there. Only now did Professor Sen Taylor realize the truth. Every archive describing the Perseus expanse had been copied from the same original source. No civilization had ever conducted an independent survey. The ruralization spread through the assembly like poison. Entire generations of scholars had assumed someone else had already mapped the region. Every government had trusted centuries of inherited records without questioning who had written them first. It was one of those invisible assumptions upon which civilizations quietly built history. Someone had wanted the galaxy to stop asking questions, and somehow they had succeeded for thousands of years. As emergency expeditions scrambled toward forgotten libraries and abandoned observatories, another impossible pattern emerged. Every ancient archive referenced a civilization that did not officially exist. The first custodians. No species possessed myths about conquering them. No archaeological site contained their cities. No museum displayed their artifacts. Yet scattered references appeared everywhere once researchers knew what to search for. Broken inscriptions mentioned the keepers. Fragmented navigation logs warned future travelers never to disturb the silent boundary. Religious texts from civilizations that had never met each other described mysterious guardians who disappeared before recorded history began. The fragments had always been dismissed as folklore. Now they sounded less like myths, and more like censored history. The assembly ordered every classified archive opened. Within hours, historians uncovered a disturbing timeline. Nearly every advanced civilization that had risen before the modern era suffered an unexplained collapse immediately after attempting large-scale exploration beyond the Perseus expanse. The official causes differed: civil wars, ecological disasters, stellar catastrophes, but the timing repeated with mathematical precision. Each civilization vanished shortly after reaching the same forbidden frontier. No exceptions. The pattern was too perfect to be coincidence. Counselor Illa stared at the growing list in silence. "If this is true," she whispered, "then someone has been editing our history for longer than our species has existed." No one answered, because another report had just arrived. Deep inside the evacuated frontier, automated human stations were activating in enormous numbers. Thousands, hidden beneath oceans, buried inside dead moons, disguised as ordinary mining facilities. Entire mountain ranges split apart as colossal machines emerged into daylight for the first time in centuries. Their designs bore no resemblance to warships or factories. Massive rings unfolded around stars. Planet-sized engines awakened beneath frozen crusts. Invisible satellites previously mistaken for natural debris suddenly ignited with pale blue light. Every installation pointed toward the heart of the Perseus expanse. Everyone, military analysts, struggled to estimate what they were seeing. The combined engineering represented more raw industrial effort than the entire Galactic Assembly had produced during the previous 500 years. It had been built in complete secrecy, not over decades, over centuries, which raised a question no strategist wanted to ask. If humanity had invested so much into hiding these structures, what could possibly justify the effort? The answer began arriving from the observatories. Data streams that had remained unreadable finally translated into coherent images. Not photographs. Warnings. Three-dimensional simulations showed an expanding wave moving through interstellar space. Wherever it passed, Stars continued burning, planets remained intact, and cities still stood. Life, however, simply ceased. No explosions, no battles, no visible destruction. Every simulation ended exactly the same way. Entire civilizations frozen forever in the middle of ordinary moments. Children sitting in classrooms, pilots holding flight controls, doctors reaching toward patients. Millions of bodies standing exactly where they had been when consciousness vanished simultaneously. The simulations labeled the phenomenon with a single designation: Event Horizon Zero. No explanation followed. Professor Taylor replayed the files repeatedly, searching for hidden metadata. Instead, he discovered something far more disturbing. The simulations had not been generated. They were recordings. Someone had witnessed those extinctions. Someone had preserved them. The timestamps attached to the oldest recording dated back almost 80,000 years. The laboratory erupted into arguments. The dates had to be wrong. Human civilization had barely developed agriculture 12,000 years ago. There was no possible connection. Yet before anyone could challenge the evidence, Earth's silence finally broke. Not through politicians, not through admirals, through a woman wearing a faded engineering uniform, standing alone inside an immense underground chamber. Behind her stretched machinery so vast that its upper structure disappeared into darkness. She looked less like a military commander, and more like a caretaker reporting the failure of an ancient responsibility. "My name is Dr. Mara Vale," she began quietly. "I am the last director of the Custodian Project." She paused for several seconds, as though searching for words humanity had hoped would never be spoken aloud. "The galaxy believes our species joined interstellar civilization 3 centuries ago." A faint, exhausted smile crossed her face. "That is when we introduced ourselves." The chamber became impossibly still. "That is not," she said, "when our real work began."
Did you hear that? I really want to know what humans have kept secret all this time.
And somewhere deep inside the Perseus expanse, something answered. The sound reached the galaxy before anyone understood what they were hearing. It did not travel through radio waves, quantum relays, or hyperspace communication. Every listening array simply began recording the same impossibly low vibration, regardless of its location. Observatories orbiting distant red dwarfs detected it at the exact same moment as research stations floating beside the galactic core. The frequency ignored the laws that governed every known form of transmission. Scientists searched for its origin. There wasn't one. It was as if the galaxy itself had begun humming. Inside the assembly chamber, no one spoke. Every delegate watched Dr. Mara Vale's live transmission, while engineers desperately attempted to isolate the signal. Instead, they discovered something even stranger. The vibration wasn't growing louder. It was growing closer. Dr. Vale seemed unsurprised. "For most of your recorded history," she said calmly, "you believe the universe was expanding into empty darkness. It isn't." The statement ignited immediate outrage. Astrophysicists interrupted the broadcast with pages of contradictory evidence. Entire universities had spent millennia proving cosmic expansion beyond question. Vale waited patiently. "When you measure a coastline from inside the ocean," she continued, "you believe the horizon is infinite. Only when you climb above the water do you realize you've been looking at the edge all along." She reached toward a console hidden beside the enormous machinery behind her. The chamber lights dimmed. Above every assembly delegate appeared the most detailed three-dimensional map of the known universe ever assembled. At first it looked familiar. Then the perspective changed. Stars rotated. Galaxies shifted. Invisible structures emerged between them. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The galaxy they had known their entire lives was not scattered randomly through space. It formed a perfect geometric lattice. Every major civilization, every stable hyperspace corridor, every ancient trade route, every so-called natural gravitational anomaly. Together they created a colossal containment framework stretching across nearly 100,000 light-years. Nobody had ever noticed because no one had ever viewed the map from outside the network itself. "It isn't civilization that connects the stars," Vale whispered. "It is a prison." There was no possible connection. Yet before anyone could challenge the evidence, Earth's silence finally broke. Not through politicians, not through admirals, through a woman wearing a faded engineering uniform standing alone inside an immense underground chamber. Behind her stretched machinery so vast that its upper structure disappeared into darkness. She looked less like a military commander, and more like a caretaker reporting the failure of an ancient responsibility. "My name is Dr. Mara Vale," she began quietly. "I am the last director of the Custodian Project." She paused for several seconds, as though searching for words humanity had hoped would never be spoken aloud. "The galaxy believes our species joined interstellar civilization 3 centuries ago." A faint, exhausted smile crossed her face. "That is when we introduced ourselves." The chamber became impossibly still. "That is not," she said, "when our real work began."
I did not see this coming. This story just changed in a very big way.
Silence crushed the chamber. Entire careers collapsed in seconds. Every accepted model of galactic history became meaningless. The Perseus expanse had never been empty space. It was a lock at the center of a structure larger than imagination itself. A frightened delegate finally found his voice. "What exactly is imprisoned?" For the first time since the broadcast began, Dr. Vale hesitated. Not because she didn't know, because she clearly wished she never had. "My ancestors called it many names," she answered quietly. The oldest surviving records translated it as a listener. The title sounded harmless, almost gentle, until she continued. "It does not conquer worlds. It does not invade civilizations. It waits." Another display appeared beside the galactic lattice. This one contained no stars, only thousands of names. Each represented a civilization. Every one had vanished. Some disappeared 80,000 years ago, others 50,000, some only 12,000. All had one thing in common. Every civilization had reached a level of technological advancement capable of detecting patterns hidden beneath reality itself. Within months, they ceased to exist. No battles, no warnings, no survivors. The room became impossibly still. Professor Sen Taylor slowly compared the extinction dates against the archaeological record recovered only hours earlier. The matches were exact. History had never repeated itself. History had been interrupted. Again, and again, and again. The realization struck like physical pain. Humanity hadn't inherited an ancient galaxy. They had inherited the aftermath of countless failed civilizations. "Who built the prison?" Counselor Illis asked. Dr. Vale lowered her eyes. "We don't know." "Then who built the machines behind you?" "My species did." Confusion swept across the assembly. "That's impossible," someone shouted. "Your civilization isn't old enough." "No," Vale agreed softly. "Our civilization isn't." She activated another projection. Images flooded every screen. Primitive humans, stone tools, bronze cities, steam engines, rocket launches, the familiar story of human progress. Then the timeline kept going. It continued backward, far beyond recorded history, far beyond archaeology, far beyond the appearance of Homo sapiens. Ancient settlements buried beneath impossible geological layers. Artifacts manufactured millions of years before modern humanity supposedly evolved. Each discovery had been hidden, not from aliens, from humanity itself. "Our species," Vale said carefully, "has survived multiple extinction cycles." Every delegate stared without breathing. What your historians call human evolution is actually humanity rebuilding. There was no possible connection. Yet before anyone could challenge the evidence, Earth's silence finally broke. Not through politicians, not through admirals, through a woman wearing a faded engineering uniform standing alone inside an immense underground chamber. Behind her stretched machinery so vast that its upper structure disappeared into darkness. She looked less like a military commander, and more like a caretaker reporting the failure of an ancient responsibility. "My name is Dr. Mara Vale," she began quietly. "I am the last director of the Custodian Project." She paused for several seconds, as though searching for words humanity had hoped would never be spoken aloud. "The galaxy believes our species joined interstellar civilization 3 centuries ago." A faint, exhausted smile crossed her face. "That is when we introduced ourselves." The chamber became impossibly still. "That is not," she said, when our real work began.
Wow, this part gave me goosebumps. Humans are not who anyone believed they were.
No one moved. No one even blinked. Earth's greatest secret had never been hidden weapons, or hidden fleets, or hidden technology. It was hidden memory. Generation after generation, humanity had deliberately erased knowledge of previous civilizations, allowing each new age to believe it was a first, not because they feared the truth, because remembering it always attracted something waiting beyond the edge of reality. The deep vibration filling the galaxy suddenly changed. It was no longer a distant hum. It sounded unmistakably like a heartbeat. Dr. Vale closed her eyes. We're too late. Then, for the first time in 80,000 years, something on the other side of the prison answered back. No alarms sounded on Earth. There were no frantic commanders shouting orders, no emergency broadcasts flooding civilian networks, no desperate attempts to hide the truth any longer. Instead, every human settlement, from the oldest cities on Earth to the newest colonies orbiting distant suns, received a single priority transmission. It contained only 7 words. Custodian Protocol Omega. Preserve every living species. Across the galaxy, confusion spread almost as quickly as fear. Alien governments expected humanity to mobilize for revenge or prepare for a hopeless last stand. Instead, the largest fleet movements in recorded history were directed away from human territory. Convoys carrying food, medicine, atmospheric processes, and evacuation ships accelerated toward alien worlds that had spent generations mocking human diplomacy. Entire human battle groups abandoned strategically valuable systems simply to escort civilian populations belonging to species that had never once offered Earth military support. The contradiction baffled everyone. If humanity truly possessed the unimaginable technology hidden beneath the Perseus expanse, why weren't they using it to secure their own future? Counselor Illis watched orbital footage from 12 different systems at once. Human destroyers were towing crippled alien freighters. Medical vessels were accepting refugees without checking citizenship. Military engineers were constructing planetary evacuation gates around civilizations that had publicly accused Earth of creating the crisis only hours earlier. Nothing about it resembled wartime strategy. It resembled an evacuation drill humanity had practiced countless times before. Dr. Marvale finally explained why. We are not trying to survive, she said quietly. We are trying to reduce the number of witnesses. The chamber erupted. No explanation in the previous 4 days had produced such immediate outrage. Witnesses to what? Demanded one delegate. Vale looked directly into the assembly cameras. The listener does not hunt civilizations. It hunts awareness. Silence swallowed the room. The prison was never designed to stop it physically. Nothing can. Its purpose has always been to prevent intelligent life from discovering it exists. She enlarged the ancient galactic lattice once again. Tiny points of light began disappearing from the projection, not because worlds were being destroyed, because they were being forgotten. Entire civilizations faded from historical records as though someone were erasing them from reality itself. Libraries no longer contained their names. Star charts no longer displayed their colonies. Computer archives insisted those worlds had always been empty. Only observers actively watching the projection remembered they had existed at all. Professor Centela stumbled backward. No! He rushed toward an archaeological database he had personally compiled over 30 years. Half of it was gone. Entire chapters he remembered writing no longer existed. Expeditions he vividly recalled funding had disappeared from every official record. Even photographs stored inside isolated offline vaults now showed empty landscapes where thriving ruins had stood only yesterday. History itself was changing, not rewriting, consuming. Dr. Vale nodded grimly. This is how every previous cycle began. It doesn't kill civilizations first. It removes the evidence they ever lived. Cold realization spread through the assembly. Every extinct civilization discovered over the last several days might not represent all the victims. Only the few humanity had managed to remember. A young Zanari scientist interrupted the silence. If memory disappears, how do you still know? For the first time, something resembling sorrow crossed Vale's face. We cheated. She turned toward the colossal machine behind her. Its surface was covered in millions of metallic plates, each engraved with names written in hundreds of alien languages. The camera slowly zoomed closer. Every plate represented a civilization, some familiar, most completely unknown. There are no computers inside this vault, Vale explained. No artificial intelligence. No digital archives. Only physical memory. She rested one hand against the nearest engraved plate. When the forgetting begins, information stored electronically disappears first, then written language, then biological memory. Someone whispered, "That's impossible. It should be." Vale's voice grew softer. But memory itself is part of reality. When reality changes, memory changes with it. The machine surrounding her suddenly made sense. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a command center. It was humanity's final archive, a monument built to remember civilizations the universe itself had tried to erase. Counselor Illa stared at one engraved name near the edge of the chamber. It felt strangely familiar. She couldn't remember why. As she continued looking, the letters slowly vanished from the metal. Not faded, vanished. The plate became perfectly smooth. Another civilization had just been forgotten. The heartbeat echoing through the galaxy grew louder. This time, everyone heard a second beat, not from beyond the prison, from somewhere much closer. The second heartbeat originated from Earth. For nearly 12 seconds, no one believed the readings. Every observatory confirmed the same impossible result. The first pulse still echoed from somewhere beyond the Perseus expanse, reverberating through the hidden lattice surrounding the galaxy. But the second was unmistakably local. It rose from beneath Earth's crust, synchronized perfectly with the first, like two immense engines answering each other across unimaginable distance. The realization struck every human commander at once. The prison had never possessed a single lock. It had always required two. Deep beneath the Himalayas, where the custodian vault descended farther than any natural fault line on the planet, Dr. Mara Vale watched a row of dormant indicators illuminate one after another. They had remained dark for nearly 80,000 years. Her predecessor had believed they never would awaken again. His predecessor had written the same final report. Thousands of generations had inherited the station, convinced they were preserving history for a future that would never arrive. Today, history had arrived instead. Around her, hundreds of engineers abandoned their consoles and simply stared at the awakening machinery. Most had devoted their entire lives to systems they were never allowed to activate. Many had been born inside the underground complex and had never seen Earth sky. They had accepted that their work would remain invisible forever. Now the impossible sequence they had memorized since childhood unfolded exactly as the ancient instructions predicted. Only one line refused to turn green. Secondary custodian presence, incomplete. Vale closed her eyes. She had feared those words more than death itself. Far above, emergency messages flooded every human fleet. Not battle orders. Volunteer requests. Every classified vessel received the same transmission. Custodian Operation Dawn is now active. Mission survival probability, 0%. Personnel participation remains voluntary. No speeches followed. No patriotic slogans. No promises of victory. Only coordinates. Within minutes, ships throughout human territory alter course. Entire carrier groups detached from defensive formations. Exploration vessels canceled evacuation assignments. Civilian research stations redirected experimental reactors toward deep space rendezvous points. Alien intelligence officers watched the movements with growing disbelief. None of the selected ships were humanity's strongest warships. Most carried scientists, engineers, physicists, linguists, mathematicians. Some were over a century old and considered obsolete by modern military standards. What are they assembling? Counselor Illis whispered. No one knew, until Professor Sen Taylor noticed something hidden inside the fleet registry. Every volunteer ship had previously participated in archaeological expeditions. Every captain possessed advanced training in ancient custodian systems. Every crew had signed lifetime secrecy agreements decades before the current crisis. This operation had not been created in response to today's emergency. Humanity had been quietly building it for generations. Across the galaxy, more hidden structures awakened. Gigantic rings concealed within neutron star systems unfolded into impossible geometries. Thousands of dormant satellites emerged from interstellar dust clouds, aligning themselves with mathematical precision. Entire asteroid belts shifted position under the guidance of engines no civilization had ever detected. The galaxy itself seemed to be rearranging. Then Dr. Vale revealed the final piece. "The prison is damaged," she said, "but it has not failed." Hope flickered across the assembly. For it to fail, she continued carefully, someone must open it. The room froze. "Open it," Professor Taylor repeated. Vale nodded. "The listener cannot cross the boundary." "Not alone." Silence followed. A horrifying possibility slowly formed inside every mind. If something was trying to escape, something else had to be helping it. Military intelligence immediately re-examined decades of unexplained events. Entire research expeditions had vanished while investigating gravitational anomalies, unauthorized excavations beneath forgotten worlds, scientists who disappeared after claiming to hear voices during hyperspace experiments, exploration crews that returned profoundly changed, insisting they had discovered the truth before destroying their own databases. Separated, each incident seemed meaningless. Together, they formed a pattern stretching back centuries. The enemy had never attacked from outside. It had been recruiting from within. As panic spread, another emergency report arrived. 3 human frontier colonies had stopped responding, not because communications failed, because every inhabitant had walked calmly into the surrounding wilderness at exactly the same time. Orbital drones tracked millions of civilians gathering in perfect silence beneath open skies. No violence, no panic, no resistance. They simply looked upward, waiting. Medical scans showed nothing unusual. Neurological activity remained normal. Heart rates remained stable. Yet when rescue teams attempted to land, the crowd spoke together with one perfectly synchronized voice. "We remember." The transmission lasted for a second before every colony went silent again. Inside the custodian vault, Dr. Vale's expression changed for the first time. Until now, she had looked exhausted. Now, she looked afraid, not because the prison was breaking, because something beyond it had finally found a way to answer humanity back. The words echoed through every surviving communication channel. "We remember." They were neither shouted nor whispered. They carried no emotion, no anger, no triumph. Yet every being who heard them instinctively felt the same impossible sensation, as though someone had spoken directly inside memories they had never lived. Within minutes, similar reports flooded the Galactic Assembly, a mining colony on the edge of the Orion Reach, an orbital university above the Varel homeworld, a research station drifting through intergalactic space. Thousands of individuals from dozens of different species stopped whatever they were doing, turned toward the same distant point in the sky, and calmly repeated the identical sentence. Then they returned to normal. Most remembered nothing. Those who did described only one thing. They had heard someone calling them home. Panic finally reached the point where governments stopped arguing. For the first time in recorded galactic history, rival empires suspended every territorial dispute simultaneously. Fleets once aimed at each other redirected toward humanitarian missions. Military factories ceased weapon production and began constructing evacuation vessels instead. It was already too late. Entire star systems were disappearing from official navigation charts, not because they had been destroyed, because no one could remember they existed. Captains flying routine trade routes suddenly found themselves surrounded by empty space where thriving colonies had stood only weeks before. Freight manifests contained references to destinations that no navigation computer recognized. Families searched census records of missing relatives only to discover those people had apparently never been born. Reality itself had begun deleting evidence faster than historians could preserve it. Inside the custodian vault, the engraved memorial walls continued changing. Hundreds of names vanished every hour. Each disappearing inscription represented an entire civilization slipping beyond remembrance forever. The engineers stopped trying to record them. There was no point. Every digital photograph erased itself moments after being taken. Every handwritten copy slowly faded until the paper became blank. Only the original engravings resisted, and even they were losing the battle. Dr. Mara Vale stood before the central control platform as humanity's highest-ranking civilian and military leaders gathered around the ancient mechanism. No speeches filled the chamber. Everyone already understood. The final protocol had arrived. A young systems engineer finally broke the silence. If we activate the inner lock... Vale nodded before he could finish. It seals the prison. And the volunteers. She looked toward the enormous star map suspended above them. Thousands of human ships glowed within the hidden lattice stretching across the galaxy. Each occupied a precise location. Each represented a living component of a mechanism no civilization had ever imagined. They become part of it.
This is a hard choice. I already feel sad for what comes next.
No one spoke again. The truth settled over the room with crushing weight. Operation Dawn had never been a military mission. It was a transformation. The volunteers were not flying to battle. They were taking positions from which they would never return. Across human space, encrypted messages began reaching those designated crews. Families embraced one another without public ceremony. Children too young to understand waved goodbye through observation windows. Some volunteers recorded final letters. Others refused, believing hope should always sound louder than farewell. Captain Elias Rowan stood aboard the exploration vessel Resolute Horizon, staring at the stars he had spent 40 years studying. His daughter appeared on the bridge through a secure communication channel. She smiled. "You knew this day might come." "I hoped it wouldn't." "Are you afraid?" He considered the question honestly. "Yes." She nodded, tears forming despite her determined smile. "So am I." Neither said goodbye. Both knew goodbye implied an ending. Instead, she simply whispered, "Keep them safe." The transmission closed. All across the fleet, nearly identical conversations ended with remarkably similar words. Not save humanity. Not win. Not destroy the enemy. Only one request mattered. Protect everyone else. Counselor Illis watched these exchanges through channels Earth had deliberately chosen not to encrypt. Only then did she finally understand why humanity had hidden the Custodian project for so long. Not because they distrusted the galaxy. Because no civilization should ever have to make this choice. The Assembly voted unanimously. For the first time since its founding, every member species requested permission to contribute ships, soldiers, or technology. Earth's answer arrived less than a minute later. It contained only one sentence. "Thank you, but this lock was built for human minds." Confusion swept through the chamber until Dr. Vale quietly explained. The lattice synchronizes through memory. It requires a species capable of remembering every civilization that has ever been lost. Professor Centela frowned. No species can remember 80,000 years. Vale's tired eyes met his. No, they can't. Unless they inherit those memories.
Now, every part is coming together. The end is going to be very powerful.
The chamber froze. Human history. The repeated extinctions. The deliberate rebuilding of civilization. The erased past. It had never been a punishment. Every generation had unknowingly inherited fragments of memories left behind by those who came before. Humanity had not merely rebuilt civilization countless times. It had carried the memory of every fallen age. That memory was a final key holding the prison closed. Deep inside the Perseus expanse, the heartbeat suddenly stopped. For one brief, terrifying moment, the entire galaxy became perfectly silent. Then something began to laugh. The laughter did not echo through space. It echoed through memory. Every being in the galaxy heard it differently. Some recognized it as a voice of a lost parent. Others heard forgotten friends, ancient rulers, or children they had buried decades before. It borrowed the most trusted voice each listener had ever known, wrapping itself in familiarity until doubt became almost impossible. Across countless worlds, people stopped where they stood. Some smiled. Others began walking toward the night sky. Entire cities grew unnaturally quiet. Dr. Mara Vale's expression hardened the instant the first reports arrived. "It's adapting." The words barely left her mouth before every screen inside the custodian vault flickered. One after another, surveillance feed began showing civilians abandoning evacuation centers and marching toward inactive hyperspace gates that had no destination programmed into them. No panic, no resistance, Only absolute certainty. The listener had stopped trying to break the prison. It had begun persuading others to open it. Every second now mattered. Deep within the hidden lattice, thousands of human ships reached their assigned positions. From the outside, the formation looked almost random, scattered across tens of thousands of light years. But when viewed through the ancient custodian projection, every vessel occupied a precise point within an immense geometric pattern that stretched across the galaxy like invisible threads woven through reality itself. Captain Elias Rowan watched the final coordinates lock into place. His bridge remained silent. No one asked if they could still turn back. No one needed to. Every officer understood that once the sequence began, their ships would cease to exist as ordinary vessels. Their reactors, computers, and even their own neural activity would become permanent components of the inner lock. There would be no return. A single light illuminated on Rowan's command console, awaiting final authorization. He looked through the observation window toward the endless stars. So many, he whispered. Not stars. Lives. Entire civilizations that would never know the names of those about to disappear for them. He smiled anyway. It was always worth it. Across the galaxy, thousands of captains spoke nearly identical words. Not because they had rehearsed them, because humanity had carried the same quiet conviction through every forgotten age. Dr. Mara Vale placed both hands upon the ancient control platform. For 80,000 years, every custodian before her had prepared for this exact moment. Some had lived believing it would never arrive. Others had died fearing they had already failed. None had ever activated the system. Her authorization was not entered through a password. It required a memory. She closed her eyes and recalled the first lesson every custodian child was taught. Not a weapon, not an equation, a promise. We remember those who cannot be remembered.
I have a strong feeling this next part will stay with me for a long time. What an amazing story. Real power is not just to fight. Real power is to protect everyone. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next story.